I'm talking with C Arnold McClure, who is not only the Republican Party chairman in Huntingdon County, but he's also a well-known columnist in the local and regional newspapers, but he's also a gentleman farmer. And so, Arnold, hey, thanks for joining us here on Middays in Racetown Country. Glad to have you along.
Greg, it's good to be here, and I really wish you the best with this operation you got going. I think it'll really be a benefit to Huntington County.
Well, and I appreciate that, Arnold. The reason why we're doing it is because, there's such a lack of dialogue utilizing the media in Huntingdon County. Traditionally for years, we only had the newspapers, and, of course, the radio stations were being operated outside the region, so there were no locally owned media other than the newspaper, and so we're doing our part to bring the awareness not only to Huntingdon County, but to our local area, because I got to be quite honest, I just moved back after 43 years, and I love my hometown, and I want to really put a spotlight on the people that can make things happen in our region, and you're one of the ones that I wanted to talk to. Let me just ask you briefly now, you are now a farmer in what part of the county are you living in, and where are you operating?
Yes, well, what you should know is that when I sold my electronics company, Central Business Products, and Xerox owns them now, I had some money for the first time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm like most people. When I started out, I had nothing. And it was a long time before I owned a car. And when I sold my company, I had some money for the first time. So I built a house and I bought a farm.
Mm-hmm.
I bought a second farm.
Wow.
And my wife and I both come from farming backgrounds, and we always admired farmers. And my early heroes were farmers, because it seemed like they knew how to fix tractors and fix equipment. They knew how to handle livestock, and they knew how to plant things, and I just looked up to them, and I always wondered if I had what it takes to be a farmer. And so in my retired age, that's what my wife and I decided to do, to become farmers.
Well, how long have you been farming, Arnold? How long now?
Well, I'll tell you, let me think here, 1999 to 17.
2009. So about maybe 17, 18 years, almost.
About 18 years, yes.
Wow. Wow, and that's kind of cool because, now what kind of farm do you have? Is it a dairy farm, a cattle farm? What kind of farm?
Well, I'll tell you, when we bought the farms, I debated what I wanted to raise.
Uh-huh.
And I thought I'm going to raise a few cattle, beef cattle.
Right.
And boy, I had a lot to learn about that. And I had an uncle that I really admired, and he suggested I buy Simmental cattle.
Okay.
And Simmental cattle come from Switzerland.
Really? Now?
Yeah, and the name Simmental, Tal, the suffix means valley in German, and Simi is the name of a valley in Switzerland, and it's where the cows had their that produced the milk for the Swiss cheese.
Really? Wow. Okay.
Yes, so the real calm cows, and they were the family cow of Switzerland.
Wow. Okay. Now, obviously, this is a whole new venture for you because you had been in electronics. You then took that money and you developed a company, which was cattling or farming, if you will. Let me ask you this, because from what I've known of your background, you were also a newspaper owner. Now, when did that come into play? And tell our audience a little bit about the newspaper you had that basically was distributed regionally.
Yes, well, I started the newspaper in 1980.
Okay.
And shortly after that, we became the first newspaper in Pennsylvania to use desktop publishing in the Macintosh system to produce a paper.
Really?
We were
Okay.
the first ones.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And we bought, I'll never forget it, I bought 2 computers and a printer from McCartney's, in Altoona.
Altoona, yeah. Yeah, I know that area.
$1,000.
Really? Oh, man. Yeah.
And that was a big breakthrough because the equipment worked great.
Okay.
And we, and the paper was, I headquartered it in Orbezonia.
All right. Now, are you from Orbezonia, or that's just the headquarters of the newspaper at the time?
Well, my family was from the Orbezonia area. I went to Mount Union High School.
Old Captain Jack. Yep.
Captain Jack, yes.
Okay.
So, you know, the whole thing down here was pretty interesting. Our community, the evolution of our community and the political and the social, all those things are of interest to me. And about 4 years into the paper, when I bought the computers, I started to keep track of historical notes.
Right. Okay.
So for 35 years, I have worked every day on keeping track of historical notes, and I ended up publishing a couple of history books.
Wow, okay.
On the history of Huntington County.
Yeah, okay.
It's called A History Between the Rivers.
The History Between the Rivers. Is that available these days, Arnold? Can I find a copy of that?
It is.
Okay.
I've sold several thousand copies.
Right.
And a lot of people buy them as gifts for their father or their son or their grandson or their uncle. And so I get lots of requests to ship books out to them.
And do you have distribution through like Amazon.com if I wanted to get a copy there? Or is it just locally sold and distributed by you?
You can get them off Amazon.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd be curious as you know, a native of Huntingdon, just getting back after 43 years, to kind of know a little bit about the history of our county. Because I'm sort of a homer myself, Arnie, in that no matter where I went, I always talked about this beautiful valley in Huntingdon County, and of course, the prolific man-made lake that we have, and have had the occasion to meet people all over the world who have visited here, and some who decided to make this their home. And that's got to be a cool thing that you've written history about it, and I certainly would like to read a little bit more about that. But having said that, let's talk a little bit about let's talk about Huntingdon right now as it is today, because I want to bring you back on the show several times. And I know, you know, in time permits, you know, we could talk for an hour, but we don't want to bore people. We want to do it in bits and pieces. Your current role now is as a farmer. You're retired. You've made some money. You created jobs, and you created wealth, you know, and you brought awareness to Huntingdon County. Now, you're also politically minded in that you are the chairman of the Republican Party, which is a rather stronghold in Huntingdon County. Tell us a little bit about maybe your perception of this recent election cycle that we're in the midst of, not just locally, but also nationally as you see it. Because obviously, strategically, you're going to want to try to help your candidate as much as you can as the chairman. What are you doing locally? What races are we involved in this year other than, I believe we have a legislative race going on this year. Is that right, Arnie?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm not sure what you're asking me, but politics is a pretty big subject.
Yeah.
And it is not, I find that most people have a simplistic understanding of it.
Okay.
And they don't understand anything about anything in most cases.
Right. Okay.
For instance, I'm the head of the Republican Party.
Mm-hmm.
You may find it interesting that one time I almost became chairman of the Democrat Party.
Okay.
When I was a young man, my family was Democrat on both sides.
Right.
And my mother's family were immigrants, and they came to Mount Union to work in the coal mines. And my father's family were farmers, and there were Democrats on both sides.
Okay.
And I became active in the Democrat Party.
Right. Okay.
And I ran 3 campaigns for county commissioner of a Democrat friend of mine.
Okay.
Named Lee Wilson. who was a very fine county commissioner.
Yes, sir.
And he became friends with Harold Lockoff, who was a great Republican.
And a great farmer, too, if I remember correctly, right? Mr. Lockoff.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
I remember him.
Yes, and those days, the Board of Commissioners got along real good and worked together, and partisanship wasn't much of an issue.
No, that's right. That's right.
Yes.
Now, go ahead. I was going to ask you to fast forward from those days of Mr. Lockoff in the early, your early beginnings politically in Huntingdon County. What big changes have you seen recently in the last, let's say, 10 to 20 years, and where are we heading in Huntingdon County with the Republican Party?
Where are we headed in the Republican Party?
Yeah, I mean, what do you see as far as the dynamics? Because, there's such a split here, I think, nationally and locally. Huntingdon County is pretty much Republicans now, and you said that you used to be a Democrat.
Yes. Well, what's happening all across Pennsylvania is many Democrats are switching to Republican. In the last 2 months, 46,000 Democrats in Pennsylvania switched to Republican.
Mm-hmm.
21,000 Republicans have switched to Democrat.
Really? Okay.
Yes. And what's happening is that we're having a total realignment of parties in America.
Yeah.
I mean, we're at the 10th. When I was a young man, the Republican Party had three main parts. They had Wall Street, Main Street, and Country Club Republicans.
Yeah, exactly. Okay.
That's no longer the case. Now you look at the Republican Party, and they are the same people who used to be Democrats.
Democrats, right? Okay. Well, we're Democrats were the Democrats in the minority. Let's say back when I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, or were they sort of the majority in Huntingdon County back then?
Say that again?
Were the Democrats like the majority back when I was a youngster in the 60s and 70s in the county? Or were Republicans pretty much the majority in Huntingdon County back in the 60s and 70s?
Well, let me tell you. The Democrats haven't been a majority since the Republican Party came about during the Civil War.
Okay.
The Democrats, ever since from Thomas Jefferson up until Abraham Lincoln, the Democrats were the dominant party.
Right, okay.
And then when a whole bunch of, are you there?
I'm still here. Go ahead. Yes, I'm here.
Whenever people started objecting to slavery,
right,
and the Democrats stayed with the South, and they stayed with keeping with the position of the people in the South, and then the Republican Party, they were called the Radical Republicans.
Radical Republicans. That's right. Okay.
And Abraham Lincoln was the first Republican to be elected president. And, of course, he freed the slaves.
Yes, indeed.
And at that time, most of Huntington County was against slavery, and they switched to Republicans.
Well, and if truth be known, Huntingdon County was a good portion of the Freedom Highway, or the Underground Railroad as we know it today. Happened in Huntingdon County.
Yes.
So anyhow, well, listen. Let me ask you this. Let's fast forward 30 years, Arnold, to today. Obviously, there's a lot of infighting in. I don't care which political persuasion you might be of. I tend to be more of an independent, and unfortunately, I will not be able to vote in Huntingdon County primaries. But that's okay because I like to select a person over the party. Now, you are representing the Republican Party. What do you see in terms of, you have a guy that's in Harrisburg. Let me just get your perception on this. What's happening in Harrisburg that we can't get anything done, Arnold? I mean, what is your perception of that?
I barely hear you. You asked about Who in Harrisburg?
Yeah, I was talking about the people in Harrisburg. Why can't we get anything done in Harrisburg now? A lot of people are asking that question.
Yes, yeah, Rich Irvin.
Right.
Well, he was just elected. He's only been in office 1 year, and we're pretty happy with him. Yeah, so he's been working real hard, and he's a young man, and I think I expect him to be reelected.
Okay. And can you still hear me? Can you still hear me, Arnold?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask you this question, because Rich had a rough way this last year, his freshman year, and you think he's going to be able to get anything done for his constituents, or are we just going to be a part of that whole political machine in Harrisburg where nothing ever gets done?
Well, of course that's what's happening everywhere. I mean,
Yeah, and he's new. He's new in Harrisburg, so he's the new kid on the block. He hasn't even gotten his feet wet yet down there.
Yes, that's right. That's exactly right. And it depends on what kind of politics that you want. Do you want a politics where a guy just brings you money? There's a lot of objection to that.
Yeah, you're right. I appreciate that. They don't have that walking around money any longer anyhow. Hell, we have problems getting a state budget passed.
Yes.
And I'm not going to put that on Rich by himself, because let's face it, there are a lot of people. Let me ask you this, Arnold. In your total belief of how the legislative body runs in Pennsylvania, do you think that's really a full-time job, or is it a part-time job like in Texas?
Well, that's a good question. I've never been representative. That is a real good question. I know whenever the governor of Texas spoke to us a couple of years ago, Governor Perry, told us that the legislature in Texas only meets for a few months every 2 years.
Yeah, and they seem to get get things done down there too.
Yes, and they're doing great. So that kind of shocked the rest of us. How to make better government is really a challenge. I mean, on a national scale, look at what we have going.
Right. Well, here again, getting back to state politics just for a second, let me ask you this, because I asked you the question about whether that should be a full or part-time job. Is that something that we need as citizens to maybe try to push to get on the referendum for a ballot vote? Seriously, because we really need to take a look as we move into this century on how efficient our government operates, and if they have less time to mess around down there, maybe we can get something done. What do you think?
Oh, I'll tell you, there are a lot of my friends who make that argument, and they might be right.
Yeah.
A lot of representatives go to Harrisburg, and they end up getting in trouble down there.
Yeah.
And and they are seduced.
Yeah.
And they are seduced by money and power and all sorts of things,
Right.
And and we know that.
Yeah.
We know that. That's why it's kind of essential to send the most stable people we can, the most well-grounded people we can to Harrisburg and to Washington.
Right. Well, let me ask you this. Have you had any problems in a small rural area like Huntingdon County of getting your message out? In other words, we know Rich Irvin is probably a good guy. He could do his job. But what compels us to vote for him again, Arnold, and put him back down there, maybe for another 2 years of, and it's not his fault. God love him. But how do we put him back down there in Harrisburg when, in fact, people are frustrated, nothing's getting done? And you can't blame him.
Maybe the question should be, why would you take a brand new guy who's just getting his feet wet and replace him already?
Yeah, that's true.
Who has to take another 2 years to learn what they're doing?
Yeah, well, that's true too.
2 years more behind.
Well, and I agree with you. Then let me ask you this question, Arnold, since I have you. Do you believe in term limits at least? And I guess some people say, well, listen, they have term limits because they're only in there for 2 years. But you've seen, and I've seen in our lifetimes, political machines where people continue to go back to Washington, i.e. Bud Schuster, now Bill, and also locally in these legislative bodies in the state, we've seen people that used to live down there forever, i.e. Bob Jubileer, Rick Geist, and many other people in the past. Should there be term limits?
Should there be term limits? I had big debate. I've been on both sides of that issue. I don't know. I don't have all the answers on these things. Yeah, I'll tell you one thing I learned a long time ago.
Uh-huh.
I learned that I don't know everything, and then I'm not always right, and I really defer to the wisdom of the people. And sometimes in election, when I hear all these pundits saying that voters are stupid for voting for Trump or for voting for whoever, well, boy, when you get down that road, that tells me you don't have much confidence in the democratic process.
Right.
And I do. Some of these people don't know what they're talking about, but once we conclude that we can't trust the electorate to choose our leaders, we're on a slippery slope out of democracy.
And I agree with you wholeheartedly there. I totally agree with you there, Arnold. And I think, we have to work the process. And this is what we've fought for all of our lives, to have a democratic society. Let me ask you this. You've got to be watching, just as I am and other people are, frustrated by what we're seeing in some of these debates here, this political cycle. Having said that, with the threat of protest, which, you and I can remember protest at the 1968 Democratic Convention. And so there's been upheaval in the political system before, but there seems to be a lot of hate going around these days. Do you agree with that? And what do you do to contain some of that hate that's happening in this political season?
Well, I'm not sure I heard everything you just said, but 1968, I was in Vietnam ducking bullets.
Right, okay.
And we read in the Armed Forces newspaper about what was happening back here. Whereas 1968, it might have been one of the worst years in our country's history. The Tet Offensive, we lost over 30,000 men in Vietnam.
Right.
Martin Luther King was assassinated.
Yes.
Bobby Kennedy was assassinated. 1968 was a terrible year, and that was the year of the Democrat Convention where they had riots. Is that right?
Yeah, you're right. That was the year. It was a very pivotal year, I think, in the history of America. I mean, one that I can remember because I was like maybe at that time 12 years old, if I was even that old. Yeah.
How old are you now?
Well, I'm 61 now. I'm 61. Yeah, I'll be 62.
I was 9 years older than you.
Yeah.
I was 21 years old when all that was going on.
Yeah. And you were fighting a war in Vietnam, which quite frankly, as I look back on that, many of you included and a lot of my other friends, were sent over there, and we really didn't know. I don't think Americans even actually knew why we were there. And to this day, I don't think we've actually treated our veterans very well from that conflict, which was never declared a war. But, Arnold, that could be another topic for another day. It
is a topic for another day. Let's get back to the political climate today.
Sure, go ahead. And let's talk about that political climate today. Seems to be a lot of hate going around, not just out here, but even within one's party as well. Is there anything being done to contain some of that hate that's being displayed by, some of the candidates towards one another?
I can't understand you. Say that again.
Well, okay, all I'm asking is, with Donald Trump, he's running for president, correct?
Yes.
Okay, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz seem to have a problem with Donald Trump, and the Republican Party oftentimes seems like they're having a problem with Donald Trump as well. How do you control the message?
Yes, well, you should know that when this all started, I did a survey of my committee, the Huntington County Republican Committee.
Yes, sir.
And who do you think was the favorite?
I don't know. You can tell us. Was it Trump?
No, early on it was Dr. Carson.
Okay.
And Dr. Carson was the favorite of the Tea Party people.
Yes. Yes.
And I know a lot of people find that hard to believe, but that's only because they never really understood who the Tea Party people were.
Okay.
And they don't.
Right.
And then later, I did another survey among the committee, and Ted Cruz was the favorite.
Mm-hmm.
And there were people who liked Kasich, and there were people who liked Huckabee, and I didn't have one person like Jeb Bush, not one person on the committee.
Okay.
And there were a couple of people who liked Trump, and then as we get closer and closer to it, Trump is becoming more and more people are supporting Trump.
Yes, they are. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this: they're canceling rallies every day now, Arnold, and it's because obviously somebody's putting these protesters up to it. Who do you think's putting these protesters up to it? I mean, why is Trump canceling these events all of a sudden?
Yeah, well, I think it's the far left myself. I mean, in Bill Ayers, the old Weather Underground, the old far leftist, avowed communist in Chicago.
Yeah.
That's who I think. What do I think of Trump?
Yeah, what do you think of Trump?
Well, I'll tell you. We Republicans are kind of, we're kind of stiff-backed, kind of proper kind of people, know?
And conservative in many instances, yes. Go ahead.
Yes. And we see things that Trump says and does, and we cringe.
Yeah. Understandable. Yeah, I can understand that.
And we say, man, I wish he hadn't said that,
Yeah, but by that time, it's too late to take it back.
Yeah, but besides all that, he's the only guy who says it as it is.
Yeah.
But does he overspeak? Does he engage in hyperbole?
Yes.
Yes, he does.
Yeah.
What's he really going to be like as president?
Yeah.
Can he be presidential? Man, we're sure hoping he can be. We're sure hoping. What I'm personally hoping is that this persona we see is part of the Trump strategy used all his life in negotiation.
Oh, yeah.
And he's got so radical that by the time you get down to what he really wants, you're so thankful that he isn't sticking to his radical agenda that you give in to him. And that's what people have done through the years. And he's using his real estate strategies in politics.
Yeah.
And, of course, it's blowing everybody's minds.
Well, you know what I think blows our mind is the fact, and I've read The Art of Making the Deal, as well as other books that Trump has written. And let's face it, he is a strategist. He is also has a television persona. He knows how that game works as far as the media. My only fear, though, is, Arnold, to be quite honest, is he's firing people up who are now taking physical shots at other people for no reason whatsoever, and somebody's bound to get either hurt or somebody's bound to get killed over Donald Trump, who hasn't really spoke to any of the issues. I mean, I could say I could build a wall too, and you could do the same thing with our own money, but the reality is we know we're not going to spend our money building any wall. The Americans, if he becomes president, will be building that wall. Because the Mexicans, quite honestly, have already told him they're not building a wall. That's just one instance, by the way, Arnold. So that's kind of scary. I'm watching it, though, and I'm sure you're observing it as well. And what can I say, man? It's a pleasure just to talk to you.
Hey, let me tell you, we've got to talk about how to make Huntington County more prosperous. And now that I'm retired, I'm working on some projects in that direction.
Yes.
And I'd like to tell you about that. about those projects and some ideas I have for making Huntington County more prosperous.
Well, what I was hoping, Arnold, maybe you can tell me today, I'd like to bring you on the show once a month because I read your columns. I think they're well written, but you have that folksy charm when you write this column that I've not seen in many years. And I don't want to, put you in the same. Well, I can probably, because a lot of these young people don't remember Mr. Rung, who wrote the Chronicles back when I was a real youngster. You have that flair in writing that you can tell us a story. You're really a storyteller, aren't you?
Well, I'll tell you. I mean, when you've written for 40 years, and that is the love of my life is writing. I'd rather do that than do anything.
Yeah.
And the challenge now is, how can we solve the divisions in our country?
Yes.
And that translates to our county. How do we make this a better place to live? I mean, that is the supreme challenge facing us.
Yes, sir.
You get to be 69 years old, you've got to do your little part.
Yeah.
And I've got some ideas along those lines, and I'm determined to do it. And I'm so glad that you have put this show together, because you're absolutely right. We need better communication. We have not had it in this county.
Right.
It was one reason I started the newspaper, but I saw quickly that talk radio and radio, man, that has been really effective.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping that your program takes off.
Well, we appreciate it, and I seriously wanted you to be among one of the first calls that I made, because I've always, from the day I met you at Payne Church when we had a little celebration for my late brother, Corky, and I could tell in just talking to you that day before I even read any of your articles that you were a pretty cool dude, Arnold, and I figured I better try to network and align myself with cool people like me. Or cool people like you who has a vision. At least we have visions. I hope you agree with that, and maybe we can have an impact. So, hey, listen, I'm back home, back in Huntingdon County, my hometown, and I'm going to do whatever I can to help lift the people, encourage them, and hopefully I can solicit your help too, and maybe I can help you out. How's that sound?
That sounds real good. You keep in touch.
Oh, I seriously will.
With me, and I'll keep in touch with you, and let's work together to make this community a better community. What do you say?
I say let's do it. Thank you again, C Arnold McClure.